And joining us now is Miles Taylor, the co-founder of the Renew America Movement, a coalition of over 150 members and former members of the Republican Party, calling for strengthening the rule of law and restoring government ethics. Having served as Chief of Staff for Kirstjen Nielsen, the former Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security under the Trump administration, in 2018 he wrote an anonymous op-ed in the New York Times providing eyewitness insight into the White House chaos, administrative instability, and the people working to keep Donald Trump's reckless impulses in check. His subsequent book, a New York Times bestseller, is a warning. Welcome to Background Briefing, Miles Taylor.
Ian, great to be with you as always.
Well, thanks for joining us, Miles. And we've heard yet another insider from the White House go public, apparently in this new book by former Secretary of Defense Esper, who mentions that apparently that Donald Trump wanted to have the military shoot at the legs of Black Lives Matter protesters and fire missiles into Mexico. But I recall going back in the very early days of the administration with the first Chief of Staff, General Kelly. Apparently Donald Trump wanted Kelly to have the U.S. Marines shoot at Mexicans crossing the border. So this is hardly news. So is there any way that people like yourself and others, and Generals Mattis and others who served in the White House and were in the Oval Office and saw Trump in action, is there any way there can be a coordinated educational process here where the American public can, particularly the supporters of Donald Trump, can recognize who he is, how he behaves, and to the extent to which it seems he's even getting worse now, in order to head him off in 2024? Because it looks like he's on a roll.
Well, I think you touch on something really important, Ian, and I'm going to be nakedly honest about that in just 1 second. But I think to start with, the takeaway from this whole, shoot protesters in the leg thing to me is that Donald Trump's cruelty was quite continuous throughout the administration. And, during the re-election period, that was something I was out there very publicly sounding the alarm about is what he had said, exactly as you noted, when it came to migrants at the southern border. Is Trump had been very explicit with us, not just on one occasion, but multiple occasions, that in his words, he didn't want to kill the migrants necessarily, but wanted to slow them down and deter them from coming to the border, and believed that they should be shot in the legs by U.S. troops to stop them at the border. I mean, I want people just to sit back and mentally time travel back to, I don't know, let's say the Clinton years or the Bush years. Can anyone imagine Clinton or Bush or Obama being reported to have wanted to shoot innocent pregnant women and children in the legs at the border? I mean, it would be the single biggest scandal of any of those presidencies. Yet with Donald Trump, it's a footnote. And then here comes former Secretary of Defense Mark Esper with yet another footnote of Trump wanting to shoot innocent American citizens for exercising their First Amendment rights. So to your point, Ian, this is how deeply, truly disturbed the man is. Forget that he was president of the United States. Any person who would want to do something like this, we would say is mentally unstable. We would say is a disturbed person that shouldn't be given responsibility, that should potentially be watched over by the authorities because of their sickening impulses. Yet Donald Trump, as you note, is trying to remain in our political system, is considering running for president again. And it's one of the reasons why we need people who served in that administration to very consistently and methodically talk about who he is. Now, this is where I'm going to be nakedly honest. I've got to express my deep, deep personal disappointment that more folks haven't done that. I've talked to a lot of them. Folks probably read accounts a few months ago of a quiet group of Trump administration officials coming together and talking about, working to thwart his 2024 plans. I'm disappointed to say that a lot of the folks involved in those conversations are still scared to come forward publicly. They're still worried about retribution. They're still worried about Trump's famously vindictive personality, and that's remained a challenge. I know Mark Esper, and he's a well-meaning public servant, but I do think folks like Mark, it would have been helpful for them to have come out before the election, before Americans had to make their decision. Now, by a thin margin, they decided not to reelect Donald Trump, but that was too close for comfort. And if he does it again, we need more of the Mark Espers out there ahead of time, ready to stop that from happening. So that's my perspective. We're working every day, frankly, to try to get more people to come forward. And it's critical for our democracy that people simply tell the truth about who this person is.
And again, I'm speaking with Miles Taylor, the co-founder of the Renew America Movement, a coalition of over 150 members and former members of the Republican Party. He served as Chief of Staff for Kirstjen Nielsen, the former Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security. And in 2018, he wrote the anonymous op-ed in the New York Times, providing insight into the White House chaos, administrative instability, and people working to keep Donald Trump's reckless impulses in check. And his subsequent book, a New York Times bestseller, is a warning. Well, the Marine General that I mentioned, the first Chief of Staff, Kelly, he did say, it wasn't exactly headline news, but he did say that the problem is that the American people need to be educated about who they vote for high office. And that was a polite way, I think, of saying, that people shouldn't have voted for Trump, or they should have vetted him a little bit more. So how do you break the spell, though? You've got propaganda outfits like Fox and Sinclair and others that basically, they're not any different from Putin's propaganda operation, frankly. So how do you break the spell there? I mean, my assumption would be that if en masse, all of these people that we're talking about who've seen Trump up close and personal, if they took out full-page ads in all of the newspapers in red states and appeared in TV ads. I'm just spitballing here. What's the strategy, Miles?
Well, I think the most important thing is for people to understand that they're being taken advantage of. Folks are really, really disinclined to see Trump for who he really is because they've been brainwashed into thinking that he loves them and he's their savior. And I say these things not facetiously. I mean, these are the terms that folks like that use when they leave voicemails on my phone is, how dare you be a traitor against our savior? Donald Trump is the real president. I mean, I get these by the dozen every single week. This is what his most fervent supporters believe. The way you reach them is not to tell them that the man they think is a savior is a bad man. It's to show them that he's trying to take advantage of them. So I'll give you an example. Donald Trump's current fundraising efforts, his political fundraising efforts, have been designed, according to the people who constructed the documents setting up his super PACs, have been designed to allow him to exercise personal control over use of the funds. What do I mean by that? I mean that rather than raising a massive war chest of tens of millions of dollars to go spend exclusively on candidates, Trump is raising millions of dollars for himself. We saw just weeks ago, one of his fundraising appeals to supporters was to help him go get a new jet to fly around in. Michael Cohen, the lawyer that worked for Trump, who defected from his universe, Cohen has said publicly that the originating documents for these political action committees give Trump majority control over how the funds are spent. This is a personal cash cow for him. That's the type of thing that supporters need to have put in front of them very prominently and very regularly, is the fact that they're being taken for a ride. Because people will stick with the tribal leader all the way till the end until they find out the tribal leader personally loathes them and is trying to take advantage of them. That's the type of thing they need to see. And we saw this effectively during the 2020 presidential campaign. My colleague, Olivia Troy, who went and worked as Mike Pence's Homeland Security advisor, went out publicly before the election, quit from the administration, and said that when COVID emerged, Donald Trump expressed in the Oval Office satisfaction that he would no longer have to, quote, shake the hands of his disgusting supporters. That type of thing was really, really effective, as people realizing Trump didn't love them. He's not a man of the people. In fact, he's the ultimate elitist. And those are the messages that people around him need to get out to the American public and is the only thing that can turn some of his most fervent supporters against him. But I'll add, Ian, I think trying to get what I call the mega MAGA crowd to reverse course is very, very difficult. I mean, once persuaded of something, it's very hard to persuade a person otherwise. So our best hope is going after disaffected Republicans, and polls show between 20 and 30% of Republicans fall in that category. People who are disillusioned with Trump and the MAGA ecosystem, and trying to convince them to band together with centrists and center-left Democrats to prevent the return of someone like a Donald Trump. That is our best hope politically.
And in terms of the pro-Putin Trump Republicans, along with Trump himself and Madison Cawthorn, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Tucker Carlson, J.D. Vance, who just got elected in Ohio to run for the Senate, Candace Owens, Steve Bannon, Peter Navarro, Matt Gaetz, etc. Obviously, most of the American public support Ukraine. And it does seem that there is a de facto alliance between Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and Putin. It's called OPEC+. But there's an interesting op-ed by Josh Rogan in the Washington Post on May the 5th. America's Gulf allies are now Putin's enablers. And at a recent meeting of the John McCain Institute in Sedona, Arizona, Representative Tom Malinowski, a former State Department official, said, Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates today are Russia's allies in the Persian Gulf by virtue of laundering Russian money and refusing categorically and deliberately to increase oil production. This is a moment when we need more countries to face a choice. Whose side are you on? Do you think that there's a way for the press to do more investigation into this triumvirate of sort of fascist and feudal petro-states?
Well, I hate to say it, but unfortunately, we live in an environment where folks like you and I, Ian, and people in the press are viewed incredibly skeptically by this audience that we need to reach. I mean, they've been persuaded by Trump and his allies that the media, that talking heads aren't to be believed, and that it's a conspiracy against them. So I actually think the most important voices here in shining a light are going to be from within the tribe, so to speak. In other words, we actually need more Republicans standing up from within the party and demonstrating the courage to simply tell the truth about what we're seeing when it comes to the Kremlin, Putin's allies around the world, and most crucially, the pro-Putin wing of the Republican Party here in the United States. I mean, I don't say this with any sense of hyperbole. The pro-Putin wing of the GOP is much like Nazi sympathizers we saw in America in the lead up to World War II. It's almost that bad. And the reason I say that's not hyperbolic is because the designs of our adversaries in Russia and beyond are similar, in that they want to extend their reach further. They want to expropriate territory in their region. They want to undermine the West and the free world. This is genuinely, from a national security standpoint, an existential threat to Western democracy. Yet we have one of the two major political parties here in the United States partly co-opted by a movement that is sympathetic towards Vladimir Putin and his aims. That's exceptionally dangerous. Now, I started my career in national security. That's where I've spent most of it. I do genuinely believe that wing of my party, the Republican Party, is at the moment one of the biggest national security threats we have faced in my lifetime, because that sympathy towards autocracy is really, really dangerous and puts us in a position to be made vulnerable to Vladimir Putin's aims and those of his allies around the world. So, to your question about exposing the extent of that danger, I think it's got to come from within the Republican Party to convince those millions of Americans who've now been sort of won over in a misguided way to the pro-Putin side. And that's going to be a very big challenge in the years to come, because, again, as I noted earlier, once persuaded of something, it's very difficult to persuade people otherwise. But the opportunity we have here is, as you know, many, many Americans, the vast majority of Americans, are now starting to see this conflict for what it is. Again, a moral and existential fight between freedom and autocracy. And that's an opportunity politically to reach some of those people that we thought potentially were too far gone.
And just to wear your national security hat for a bit, Miles Taylor, the war in Ukraine, to many analysts, a lot of people that I spoke to, didn't think it was ever going to happen, particularly Russia experts, but it did, and it seems irrational. But Putin is making a ton of money because of the price of oil, as is MBS in Saudi Arabia and MBZ in the Emirates. Now, is there a possibility that some of that money, or a lot of that money, could end up influencing our elections? Because, for example, MBS, Mohammed bin Salman, just gave Jared Kushner $2 billion for his private equity fund with zero transparency, against the advice of his own sovereign wealth fund. So I see that as a potential danger, because we know, I think the last election was $5 billion spent. So $2 billion is a pretty good down payment.
Yeah, Ian, it's not just a possibility, it's an absolute certainty. And when people are fueling up their cars, I hate to say it, but it is filling people's heads with misinformation. Let me walk you through that chain. Russia, as you know, makes most of its, as a country, most of its GDP off of those types of exports, off of energy exports. As John McCain famously said, it's a gas station masquerading as a country. So the longer we're filling up cars with Russian oil and gas, the more we are quite literally fueling Russia's misinformation efforts. The Kremlin is directly taking the money that comes into their country and using it to undermine the West. So this is exactly what you would call a geopolitical unforced error, is we're effectively doing this to ourselves. Now, economically, it's going to be still a long road to disentangle ourselves from Russian oil. It's going to take some time. You certainly don't want to cut all of that off cold and literally leave people in the cold in places like Eastern Europe and elsewhere. But the danger here is real. The economic entanglement we have with Russia is fueling their efforts to undermine the West. So it needs to be a strategic objective in the United States, regardless of party, Democrat or Republican, to slowly, or rather to speed up the disentanglement with the Russian economy and to cut them off. In the long run here, you have to just take Vladimir Putin seriously and listen to his words. And this is exactly what I was saying after 9/11 about Osama bin Laden, is there was a lot of debate and discussion in the national security community about what this terrorist organization would do. What are its aims? Where are they trying to go? And the simplest explanation was to just merely go back and read bin Laden's words, and you could understand his intentions. He laid them out over years in the lead up to 9/11 and largely stuck with that worldview. Vladimir Putin is the same way. And if you go back and read the strategic vision he has sketched out for his country, it is, one, to restore the former Soviet Union. That is his life's work, is to go restore the former Soviet Union, to capture those countries in Russia's periphery and bring them back into the fold. And two, to be viewed as a peer competitor to the United States. He wants to be seen on the international stage as an equal, and to be seen as an equal, he's got to exert equal force and power around the world. Well, what does that mean? That means he's going to go grab countries, and it means he's going to go do bad things around the world. That is bad for us. And so we have to take him seriously. We have to listen to Putin's words. I don't believe he's going to deviate from either of those objectives. Putin would sooner die than see that legacy forfeited. So we need to be preparing not just for the conflict in Lviv, we need to be preparing for the conflict in Los Angeles, because the Russian federal government is going to continue to target America, and not just as a proxy in a war in Eastern Europe, but they want to continue to penetrate the American heartland with misinformation, espionage, and other nefarious activities. And we need to be wide-eyed and clear-eyed about that.
So just in the last couple of minutes, to bring the conversation back to your former job, Miles Taylor, with Homeland Security, there's a bill that was put forth by Senator Tom Cotton and Congresswoman Lauren Boebert to defund the DHS's new Disinformation Governance Board. And also there's an effort by Senator Rand Paul to put on hold the nomination of the Undersecretary of Intelligence and Analysis at DHS, Kenneth Weinstein. So what I find extraordinary, apropos of what we're talking about, Senator Rand Paul recently got into an exchange with Secretary of State Blinken in a Senate hearing, and it was unbelievable. Rand Paul was literally parroting Putin's talking points. And he's turning around and trying to stop the DHS from doing their job and alerting the American people to ongoing Russian disinformation. Isn't there an obvious kind of link there?
Well, it's incredibly disturbing. I mean, look, I've sat in those rooms. I've been at the top levels of the Department of Homeland Security, and I think that we should trust our DHS secretary to do what's needed to thwart foreign disinformation efforts. Now, that said, there's clearly a branding problem, and there may be some personnel problems with the office that DHS stood up on disinformation governance. But the overall objective is one that needs to be pursued by the department. To be a little bit more clear, when I was at DHS, we were daily receiving intelligence reports about the Russians trying to sow misinformation and discord in the United States, pumping fake news into our country to piss people off and to divide them. Okay, no one should be opposed to stopping that. That should be a totally bipartisan thing, is to stop a foreign government from pumping fake news into our country to make us fight each other. That's what the department is trying to do. And whether it's Rand Paul or Tom Cotton, there needs to be a unified front in standing up to that. Instead, they're trying to score political points against the Biden administration. And what I worry about is this is becoming a fake debate about whether the Department of Homeland Security is trying to be a, quote, ministry of truth. Trust me, I know the Secretary of Homeland Security. I know Ken Weinstein, the man he's trying to bring in as the Undersecretary of Intelligence. Neither of them are trying to create a ministry of truth to weigh in on our politics and to turn DHS into a political apparatus on those issues. What they're trying to do is keep bad guys from splitting us apart as a country and from infiltrating our country and manipulating it with misinformation. We should all be united around that front. So what Rand Paul, Tom Cotton, and others are trying to do, I think, is a complete distraction, and ultimately is going to set us back from doing what we need to do, which is standing up as a country against a foreign adversary that's trying to get us to stand down on the world stage.
Well, Miles Taylor, I thank you very much for joining us here today.
Ian, thanks for having me as always.
And again, I've been speaking with Miles Taylor, who's the co-founder of Renew America Movement, a coalition of over 150 members and former members of the Republican Party, calling for strengthening the rule of law and restoring government ethics. Having served as Chief of Staff for Kirstjen Nielsen, the former Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security under the Trump administration, in 2018 he wrote the anonymous op-ed in the New York Times providing eyewitness insights into the White House chaos, administrative instability, and people working to keep Donald Trump's reckless impulses in check, and his subsequent book, a New York Times bestseller, is a warning. We can take a brief station break. We're back looking into the alliance of Putin's Russia with Mohammed bin Salman's Saudi Arabia and Mohammed bin Zayed's United Arab Emirates, and how the war in Ukraine, which makes no sense strategically for Putin, is nevertheless reaping a windfall for him, with the price of oil